All right, here we go. So this is module something. Here we go. We're going to continue with known issues, start a new composition, new project right here, new composition, and we're going to make this, let's say 25 seconds, and change the color to does not matter. All right, we're going to animate some text today. So the text tool is right up here. The shortcut key for that, if you hover over it, is Control-T. You can just click. I'm going to add one letter and say H. So now I'm going to highlight this selection right here, and I can go to my font size over here and increase the scale, or I can change the scale over here on this layer itself by pressing S and then changing the scale here. If you notice in this object, the anchor point is in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, so I'm going to center this anchor point, which is Control-Alt-Home. Today I'm going to show you how to lengthen these layers, and we're going to animate letters into words. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to press Control-D for duplicate, and you see I just made two H's. This is called H2. So now I'm going to use the text tool. I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to change it to E. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to Control-D, and now I'm going to press V for the move tool. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to do this until I get two words. The first word is hello. Centering the anchor point every time. I'm moving this with the arrow keys. Okay. And I'm going to spell another word. Control-D. Pressing Enter will rename this layer. And Control-D. Control-T. T. Holding Shift and moving the arrow keys will speed up the process. Control-D. Now I have two words out of multiple layers of letters. And I'm going to animate these individually. So first, I want to move all of this somewhere else on the screen. So you can pan the screen by clicking your mouse button down and dragging left to right, and you can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. Also, this right here, you can click on this section right here and choose Fit up to 100%, and it will recalibrate the screen. I'm going to click and drag all of this so I can move it all together, and I'm going to position it down here. Okay, now with all that selected, of deselect, I'm going to select again. I'm going to click on the end of one of these layers and drag them. Since I have them all selected, they're all going to move, and I'm going to make sure that they only go to 2 seconds. So now the length of each one of these letter layers is 2 seconds long, and it won't play beyond that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is animate each one of these guys coming in by themselves. This animation is going to take about 1 second, and it's going to stay on the screen for 1 second. So if I zoom in down here on the timeline, 1 second is right here. So I'm going to go ahead to 1 second, and I'm going to select all the layers again. I'm going to press P. I'm going to turn on the stopwatch for P. Once I have them all selected, if I click one, it's going to affect all of them. I'm also going to press S. I'm going to lock in a keyframe for position, scale, R, rotation, T, opacity. So no matter what I do to this animation over here in the timeline, at the beginning of the timeline up until 1 second, it's going to come back to what it looks like right now. And what do I mean by that? First, I'm going to move the scrubber back to 0, and I'm going to click an empty space and deselect everything. Okay, I'm going to collapse all of these. I can click the arrows and collapse them. The easiest way to do this is just to select all of it and then collapse one, and they will all collapse. So first, I'm going to animate this layer. So let's do P. I'm going to do position on this one. So I'm going to move the scrubber up until, let's zoom in a little bit further on the timeline, up into 10 frames, okay? I'm going to move this guy up here. And I'm going to animate the position, rotation, scale, and opacity of every single one of these. So he's going to start up here and then move down here. And I'm going to drag this to make it. So that is what I want you to do on each one of these. I want you to animate the rotation, scale, and position and opacity of each one of these layers. So I'm going to press T now, and I'm going to change the opacity to 0, and I'm going to move this keyframe to the beginning. You don't have to duplicate exactly what I'm doing, but I want you to do it to each one of these layers. So now I'm going to go to the E, and I'm going to press P for position, and I'm going to move this off to the side. Actually, I'm going to open this up so you can see everything I'm doing. It's probably easier that way. And now for the scale, I'll just drag the scale down. It's going to change that, and I'm going to say, click on the very first for rotation, the first 0, and I'm going to say 2. So what that means is it's going to rotate 2 times from this point up until the last keyframe right there. Okay, and now opacity, I'm just going to change this down to this. So it's going to be moving in, boom. Okay, so that's pretty easy if you approach it this way for each one of these layers. You just open it up and look at each one of the transforms. And what letter am I on now? Selecting this, I'm just going to move this guy up here. And change the scale. Change the rotation to, change the opacity. So they're all going to do the same thing. Close this up and I'm going to go on. Okay, I'm only going to do that for this letter here. I want you to do it to every single one of the letters because I want you to get in the hang of animating transformations. So it's just practice. It's not busy work. I want you to keep doing it so you get the hang of it and you get better control, especially for rotation. Okay, and it's very vital that you made these keyframes first in the beginning. Okay, so let's say I did that for every single one of these, and I want you to do it for both words, okay? But for Moto, I'm just going to treat it as one block and move it in together. So I'm going to do position, and I'm just going to move it off. So it's going to come in like this. Okay. Alright, so now what we're going to do is something called pre-compose. In Photoshop, it's called merge layers. So in Photoshop, when you merge layers, you can't really unmerge layers without going and dissecting a layer and putting it on individual layers again. But in this program, you can select layers, sort of merge them, and then you can go in and still edit them. So it's not called merge in this program. I'm going to take these layers and split them into 2 words. So first, H-E-L-L-O. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose pre-compose, and I'm just going to call it hello. And it's going to fill up the entirety of this layer here, which doesn't matter because I know that it doesn't go beyond 2. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing to Moto, and I'm going to Control-Shift-C is a shortcut for pre-compose, or you can select the layers and right click and choose pre-compose, and I'm just going to call this Moto. Okay, so now I can control these individually. Now what I'm going to do is stagger this animation a little bit. I'm going to take hello, since it all pretty much comes in at the same time. I'm going to take it and drag it to the right a little bit so it's a delayed entrance. So hello comes in after Moto. I'll change it up a little bit more. There we go. Okay, now what I'm going to do is show you how to split layers. So I'm going to select both of these layers and I'm going to merge these. So let's not do that. I'm going to show you how to go inside of these pre-composed layers. So You have hello and Modo. If I double click Modo, you see it pops up here, and now every single layer that's on that pre-composed layer is still in here doing what it did originally. So I can close that out. If I ever want to go back to it, I can just double click Modo. Also, it's up here in the asset library. Same thing with hello. I can double click hello and then see what's going on here. And if I wanted to, I could select these layers and make them longer. Still edit them. In Photoshop, when you merge stuff, you can't really edit it like this. So now I can exit out of this, and go back to the animation, and hello is going to be on the screen much longer than Modo. Okay, now what I'm going to do is a simple shape animation in the background, making sure I deselect all these layers, otherwise you're putting a mask on a layer. So I'm going to make sure the layers are deselected. I'm going to select the rectangle tool, and I'm going to double click the icon up here. Boom, boom. That fills the screen. Okay, I'm going to drag this to the bottom, press enter, and name it background. And I'm going to animate the opacity on this going away. So it's here, and then it's going to disappear at 2 seconds. So I'm going to press T for opacity, turn on opacity, and at 3 seconds it's gone. So the opacity is to 0. So what I'm going to put at the top now, I'm going to deselect everything. I'm going to go back to the shape layer tool. I'm going to change the fill to black, turn the stroke off by changing it to 0 pixels, and I'm going to double click the shape. This is going to be called fade in, so I'm just going to press enter, fade in, press enter again, and now I'm going to animate the opacity on this at 10 frames going to 0. So I'm going to press T for opacity, and I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to go to 10 frames and change that to 0 and press enter. Boom! So now it fades in. There comes the animation, and then that fades out, and then we're going to fade this back in at 3 seconds. So this is a hold keyframe. I'm going to select this as a review from last module. Control C, Control V, and now at 4 seconds this fades all the way back to 100%. So this is what you should have at the end. I'm going to press Control K and change the time to 6 seconds, so 0, 6. And if you have this at the end, I know you watch the entirety of the video and you get full credit. Boom.